Welcome to the Journal Star Sportswriters podcast, and we've got head coach Darrell Crouch from Washington High School and his wide receivers coach Rob Garcia with us. And we're looking at a play on a loop here over and over. As a lot of you out there probably know by now, they had a walk-off win Friday. And you're looking at that play, Coach. Is that still something to see, huh?
It is. It was unbelievable. I mean, our kids kept coming, kept believing, and you can see the excitement of every kid on that field, and you can't see the fans, which is too bad from the angle here. But if you look on the Facebook of Jason Dietrich, you can kind of see that too, where it's just pandemonium. So it was special.
Who called that play?
Coach Garcia.
Coach Garcia. How come?
Just faith in our guys in that situation, and it's really kudos to Darrell. Every day in practice, we did it just a couple hours ago. We finished with 2 minutes, so that's one of the plays I feel the boys were comfortable with, and they really stepped up and executed.
Boy, you guys, as we were talking right before we went on air here, you've kind of mastered these dramatic wins. And going back to the playoffs, of course, last year. I mean, what is that? How do you keep pulling that off?
I think we spent time though, like Rob was saying, we finished practice in our 2-minute and 2-point play drills. We tried to put them in that situation in practice, and they just executed that. We really don't want to be in this situation. I mean, we played pretty poorly the first quarter offensively and got a little bit better in the second. And even defense, we struggle, and Coach Stevens does a great job with our defense, but their speed was a little more than we thought it was going to be in the beginning, and they have some talented kids. But I think just that practice that we do with our guys, I'll put them in those situations of, hey, 2-point play, let's go. In practice, they do it all the time.
You were 20 down in that game. What do you say to those kids to keep them in it?
The plus was, we started to move the ball a little bit in the second quarter, and then we got into our heavy sets and kind of pounded at them like we did Crete last year in the playoffs. And they didn't respond very well. Our kids really responded, super well. And it was just kind of smacked them in the face. We ran a lot of, heavy fullback lead with 2 fullbacks in the game, and I don't think that's something they're used to out of their conference in their area. And had a really good sustained drive, got it right down, and then just didn't get it stuck in at the end. And I think that carried over second half.
It's such a colorful celebration, an experience, your games out in Washington. When I was out there Friday, you had a brand new grandstand and all that. We talked briefly about it on the field. I mean, as you took all that in, what was your impression of how everything looks out there right now?
I just think that it's an unbelievable facility when you look at it. The 12th man and our football alumni helped put together the Pantherplex. That was kind of the first step. Our school administration had done the turf field, which benefited everyone from PE to band to football, soccer, and then that final step of putting in the bleachers and the new press box. Our press box, you've been there before. That was not a jewel at all, and the press box we have now is very.
It's a jewel.
Good. And you think about when people are looking to move, and you come in and check a community out. We have great athletics, we have great band, we have great academics, and then you see those facilities. You're starting to try to make a decide on where you want to live. That definitely helps.
You're a PE teacher?
I am driver's ed. I was PE weight training when I first got there. I've been driver's ed solid now for maybe 8 years now, 9 years.
Uh-oh. What's the number one mistake?
Number one mistake by our kids, not checking their blind spot. We try to get that one in there continually. I really like it. Coach O'Neill, that's on our staff still, is retired. Coach Cooper, both those guys were really good mentors for me in the driver's ed program. I think we have a very, very, very good driver's ed program. I'm the department head of that too.
Does it help you with your nerves of steel?
In the driver's ed car, it's all about being calm. I tell our kids, and you have some kids that are uptight. They're like, "Oh, I just had a person last night come up to me at my dad's visitation and was like, my daughter had you, loved you. She was scared to death because she had Coach Crouch, thought you were going to be yelling at her like a football player, and we're just not. You want that person driving that car to be as calm as they can be when you're behind the wheel with them of a 2-ton vehicle.
Teaching them a game plan.
Yeah, and we teach a little bit different at our school. We do our classroom right along with the driver's ed behind the wheel experience. So the things we're talking about are going back and forth between the two. And I think that helps.
Now, as you mentioned, you lost your father, Royce, on Monday, and I'm sure growing up as a kid, he had a big influence on you, and you probably like to say some things about him.
I put that out on Twitter. Like, that was one of my heroes of, like, growing up. We, all four of us, my son, daughter, and my wife Kathleen, all talked at his funeral yesterday of just like what a positive influence he was on our whole family. He taught me everything from physical toughness, hard work, discipline, to family and love. I mean, he was an unbelievable guy and had no father growing up. Like, his father was not in the picture, and still chose to be like a great father for me. I'm an only child, so I got all of his attention. I was fortunate my mom was great too. My dad was a really good football player back at Normal Community in his day, and had chances to go on but didn't have the grades because he didn't have a person that was that influence in his life, and so he always stressed the academic part with me. But watched him as he's a general superintendent, worked his way up from a guy with just a high school education to general superintendent for Jail Roan, and ran multi-million-dollar jobs. I talked at his visitation yesterday about how I always saw him read. My grandfather read, his male role models. I read a lot. My son reads a lot. I think that a lot of things I do are because of him.
Yeah, and he was at your game Friday. He saw this.
Home games, unless he was really, really sick, he was not ever missing. It was kind of special. He would sit up in my office faces, so he would sit in that chair. So that'll be tough coming up there Friday before and after the game. That's where I always saw him, and he would stick around. Last Friday night, it was kind of funny. He got locked out of my office, and he was like a humble guy. Wouldn't go get someone to let him in. So when it got cold out on the deck, he went to his car and watched it from there, and then left me a message of, basically, why the hell did you lock me out of the office on Friday night? So when I went to see him Sunday, we talked about that. I was like, just habit of walking out of my room, because he's usually there, and I don't shut the door. It's usually open with him sitting there. So that'll be hard. I mean, he was he and my mom both. My mom's been gone 11 years, but my biggest fans through Little League, through college football, high school football. A lot of my buddies that came to either last night or the graveside, were just welcomed in their house, and he had a huge impact on their lives too.
Growing up, Normal Community High School eventually, but as a kid, what kind of athletic stuff did you do? What were you into?
A lot. I played JFL, played softball, and then fast pitch softball, like 4-H fast pitch. No kidding. Where we grew up out by Lake Bloomington there, Hudson was the closest town, did not have baseball at that time. Like, they only had softball till like probably 6th grade, so you either had to go to Legion, and for us, with going in to play, I played for the Twin City Tigers. Going into practice, you were already driving in there half the year. You'd ride a bus home, get home from school, eat, throw your stuff on, and my dad would take me back to practice on those days, and just didn't feel like doing that with Legion baseball too. So I played football. By the time I got to 6th grade, I was wrestling and playing football, playing basketball. And then once I got to Normal Community, primarily just football and wrestling.
And then, of course, you went on beyond high school and played in high school. You play in college?
I did. I played at Illinois State.
Yeah,
so
Illinois State.
It was a pretty great experience. I started as a freshman, played all 4 years there. And then my 5th year, George Girardi was a great guy. The head wrestling coach had let me come to their practices in high school, and I wrestled a 5th year for him as well. So
That's
it was fantastic. Kind of a all-around experience there at IHSA for me.
So from there, between there and turning up at Eureka College as a head coach, what did you do?
When I wrestled for George, I took that fall, and one of our football coaches was friends with Dean Barges out at what was Octavia then and became Ridgeview. So I got a chance to spend a year with him coaching. When I student taught, I was with Ed Thomas up at Chenoa, which was an unbelievable program as well. And then after I finished, like, my dad is the one that talked me into taking a teaching job, because our family background's construction, and I was going to take a $10,000 pay cut to take my first teaching job and coach 2 sports. So when you talk about time commitment and where I was at and what I could make construction within a year versus what I was going to make teaching and coaching, and my dad, he just laid it out there of, you want to do something you love, and you want to do this out in the snow, rain, when you're 45 or 55 years old. So that was how I ended up in teaching, and John McIntyre hired me at Normal. I'd been back there helping with wrestling, and coached for him, Hall of Fame coach, and learned so much from him. Like all 3 of those, Dean Barges, Ed Thomas, and working with John McIntyre, those guys really shaped me and taught me a lot. Was fortunate then when we were all leaving. John was getting out at Normal. Went to Eureka College with John Tolley at that time. A lot of what we do still stems from him offensively. Like, he was very multiple. Like, he wasn't afraid to put 3 guys in the backfield, and he wasn't afraid to come out with no one in the backfield. He was way ahead of his time. And that was like early 94, I think. I got a chance to coach with him. And then disappointed, he went back to the West Coast where he was from. So I felt like I got kind of cheated there, but learned a lot from him and other coaches at Eureka too. And then was fortunate enough to become D coordinator there, and then head coach in, I think, 2000 probably?
2000 through 2004.
Yeah, 2005 I came to Washington. Kurt that's there now, Barth, got a chance to be around him. We both came into Eureka College at the same time, him as a player, me as a coach. And then he came back and coached for me later at Eureka College as well, and he's gone back there, and like his legacy there is unreal. Like, he's done things that I couldn't get done there.
Well, I was going to ask you, coaches study each other, they study teams, they study tape, but along the way, as you've built your career, who's that guy that was your mentor, or a guy who influenced you as a coach?
I think John McIntyre a lot. I was fortunate as well that my offensive line coach at Illinois State was Bob Hefner, who coaches Superbacks now up at Northwestern. He was huge as far as, just like my dad. I spent a ton of time with him. I mean, you think about those years from when you're 18 to 21, every day with him in a room. Like, my freshman year, I started on defense as a freshman with Greg McIntosh, who ended up at Indiana. And he was kind of like toughness factor. He was really good for that. And then just from a teaching standpoint, Hef was great, plus the toughness from him. I was fortunate. A guy that didn't coach me high school wise was Gary Llewellyn, who was our that time it was called personal fitness, which is, at that era we had the old universal machines. We didn't have free weights, but like, he was an ex-Marine, and like, he was great as far as, again, toughness, discipline. I'm not going to be fair. I'm going to be consistent. And like, he was a huge influence on me my sophomore year, helped me grow a lot. So, but I think coaching John McIntyre would be, one of the main ones. I spent a long time with him, learned a lot from him. I only really got that 1 year with John Tolley, and even with Ed Thomas, I only got 1 year with him and Dean Barges. But I would say John McIntyre the most.
Rob, where are you from, and when did you get on the Washington staff?
Originally born and raised in Texas, moved to Central Illinois during high school, so finished my high school career at Princeville High School, and then I got on with Darrell in 2011. So,
what's it like working for this guy?
Oh, I'm just trying to soak it all in every year. So it's great. We're actually next door neighbors, so we bounce a lot of things off of each other, and it's been a good relationship.
Coach, you had the opportunity, and probably every coach wishes he could do this. I mean, you had your son on your team, Will. And that was, his last year was last season. What's it like coaching your own kid?
It was good, and last year was really the only year that I got a chance to coach him personally. Like, we tried to stay not in the same group. Like, Todd Stevens did a great job with him, had as a linebacker. He unfortunately tore his labrum last year, and we moved him to D-line just to get him through, but I wouldn't trade that experience for the world either. I mean, I was fortunate. My dad coached me 1 year in like 8th grade JFL. Just the time that I got to spend with him and the moments I got to share with him are super special. I think probably one of my favorite pictures is freshman year. I have a picture of him, my dad, and myself after Will's first game. That's probably one of my favorite ones. It was on that Twitter post that I made with my father. But it was a blessing to be able to coach him. And my daughter, she was a big part as well. Like, from the time at Eureka College, McKenna knew the ins and outs, who was in trouble, who wasn't. Like, always was around football. For a girl, football IQ, really good. Up until this year, we always had like Friday lunch dates. We'd go Friday afternoon right before our games and get a chance to eat. And even when she was going to ICC in her first semester at ISU, she would come back. So that was special with both those. I mean, our whole family, my wife's super supportive.
Yeah, Kathleen. And where is McKenna now? What is she
McKenna is at ISU in her last 3 semesters of undergrad, and then she's going to go into speech pathology.
And Will?
He is at Augustana with Coach Ragone, and there Coach Bell is the head coach. So he's sitting this year.
I was going to say he's not playing right now.
No, he he got released right at the end of summer, but he hadn't really been in the weight room, hadn't done things, and he had shoulder surgery in spring break time. So we're just letting him heal up, get bigger and stronger. And he came in, 3 weeks ago with the team, learning, listening, and then he's just doing anything from fixing helmets with them and hanging out with Coach Call, who's his D-line coach, and just trying to soak things in.
Now, if we called up Kathleen, would she say you bring the game home on late Friday night, or what kind of mentality do you have when the final gun sounds and it's over?
Not so much. Like, I'm up early Saturday morning. Usually game nights I have trouble sleeping, so she's in bed. Like, we'll usually go out afterwards. Our staff is pretty close. We'll go to Cups after the games. And then whatever time I get home, then I'm still usually up till 2 or 3 of just, like, can't wind back down. Get up at 6, start watching our game from the night before. Usually meet Coach Davis up at the Plex about 8. Open up our ice tub. So not really that much gets at home. There's times, weeknights maybe, where I'm working on things while we're sitting there, but definitely not the game night. And with Will and I, that was one of the things Hal Kyoto and Pat Ryan were both great about, didn't really talk about football at home with their kids unless they brought it up. So we never were like, we watched a little bit of film at home, but it was only if Will came to me and was like, hey, can we watch this and talk about this?
Good separation, right?
Yeah, it was. Anyway, it was a good separation, really, of having him with, Todd. Todd was a great mentor for him, did a great job coaching him up. And, like, I was usually only on him when he'd screw up or I was on his case about something. I didn't really coach him a whole lot until last year.
Washington, again, watching all the servicemen and the police that turned out for your player on senior night last week.
That's pretty special.
And the grandstand and all that stuff going on. It's such a tight-knit community. And I think a lot of that goes back to the tornado experience, of course. And I imagine that had a profound effect on you and everybody over there. Where were you on that day?
So that day we were at my house at the lake. We had sold our house there, moving all our stuff over. Herb Noblock, our AD, was helping me. He got a panel van. We're loading up, and then you have so many tornado warnings and things that happen like that. But it wasn't that big a deal. Kathleen called me. She's like, hey, we're going to the basement. Sirens went off. So you don't really think that much about it. It happens how often, and nothing ever comes of it. So we finished loading up the panel van, started driving back, and then Jimmy Malinowski was out there helping us load up, called me. He's like, hey, I think the tornado hit your guys' town. And then as we got closer, you could just see everything. So we were on our way back in when all that went down. And it was just like, when
it was
we got
unbelievable.
there, could not believe everything. And like, phones were jacked up. I had players calling me, and I can still remember, I think it was Brogan Brownfield and Chris Friend. I was like, go to my house. Like, just because I couldn't get them to pick the phone up, and you didn't know where it got hit, what got hit, and it was just, I don't know, what do you think, 4 blocks from where we are?
Correct.
I mean, it was close, enough that it snapped a tree off in our yard and put it up into our power line in the side of our house. But we're fortunate nothing happened. It was just a rental house that we were in at that point, because we had just decided to move over because McKenna was going to be a freshman, so we could get everybody in the same place. And it was just tough coming back and then, getting my family squared away. And then we went out with Todd Stevens and some other coaches just to check on players. I can remember showing up at Colton Marshall, our quarterback's house, and there was like nothing there but him and rubble trying to find stuff. So it was...
It changes your perspective, doesn't it?
Perspective, and even our boys had to grow up overnight.
Right.
That part was super tough. Probably the only thing that was harder that I've ever dealt with was when Evan passed away in Noblock, my 3rd year, right after we'd made the playoffs. Great kid. Spoke at his funeral. That's probably the single hardest thing I think I've ever had to do and deal with. And then I put the tornado in there as a close second.
It just, the community is so strong in the wake of that, and the way you guys had to approach going through a playoff and all of that. I mean, when you look back at it now, how did you do it?
It just seems like it was so long ago, too. Now when you think back of, it was tough. Like, we played a game with not really having a scouting report. Kurt Barth was great to us, let us come over to his place because we had no power, anything to do there. ISU let us come in and we practiced there. U-High fed us, helped us out. So many people, like not just of our town, but like surrounding towns were great, towns out of our conference. A ton of support that we got out of that whole situation.
Well, you start into conference season now, and what's the outlook for this team, Coach?
We'll see. I think that a lot of people, I kid them all the time because how people talk around town. Some had us winning the state championship last year, and then you have people that are this team that's coming up now. I told them when we had our very first meeting with them and parents, went to the weight room, and I was like, a bunch of people said, Coach, you're going to be good next year. I just asked our seniors, I'm like, what's that say? What are they saying about you guys if they're saying you guys are going to be really good next year? And just try to let that kind of get underneath their skin. Because those kids, did they lose as freshmen? No.
I don't think they did.
Lost one game as sophomores playing JV with sophomores against JV guys. The ones that were in the lineup last year lost one game at Crete-Monee. So they've lost 2 games in their life.
In their whole career.
And they lost week 1, but that was a super formidable team. And so I think they can be, if they can play like they did second half last week, they can be a contender for conference champ. If we play like we did week 1, not so much. We offensively, at least. Defensively, I thought we played decent week 1. But we gave up a touchdown on special teams. We gave up a touchdown on offense. So there's 14 of the points that we got put on the board week 1 that we handed to them, and they earned the other 10.
You got a lot of good coaches in this area, a lot of coaching talent. If you had a Friday night off and wanted to go watch a football game just to be entertained, who'd you want to go see?
I think there's a lot just within our conference. You look at Pat and the record he's had there and the things he's gotten done. You look at Brett Caslett at Dunlap, he gets a lot out of the guys he has because he doesn't, other than their team that was their semifinal team, that's probably their best offensive and defensive line in that school. You'd have to show me guys that were better than that group they had, and then they had some skill guys around them. Mm. But he's continuously been able to throw the ball and make things happen with lines that are not and that's not saying it in a bad way. They're just not the best line in the conference yet. He's still able to put points up on the board and do things there. With Tim at
over at
Peoria Central, he's simple, but he's fast. It's a lot like Coach Hammer, who coached for him at one point, that's over at Rock Island. Kind of that same thing. We got a chance to coach in the All-Star game together of his. If I could go back, I would really like to go back to Coach Semper when he was at Richwoods, when he had it going, and some of the things that he was doing at that time.
And watch one of those. Okay.
Yeah, and we saw him up close and personal for a couple of years, but just even more than a Friday night, I would like to go to some of those guys' practices of how they do things.
And see how they develop.
Yeah, I'd say even more so than a Friday night because things are happening so fast. And John McIntyre is the guy I coach with that could watch a game and tell you everything going on, and I'm not that guy. I have to film study and look at that a lot. Where if you can go to their practice and see how did they do those things, especially when Pat really had it going with their hybrid wing T, and those teams. We knew what was coming and couldn't stop it. They were just solid. But how did they get their reps in practice to get things done? And we're all about, if you ever see Coach Garcia on Tuesday, what's the Tuesday tweet every week?
Tempo Tuesday.
We're fast-paced, trying to get through things, and then kind of workhorse Wednesday. And then you would laugh if you came to our Thursday practice. It's like a joke. We're not hit. We go hard Tuesday and Wednesday, but Monday, we're not hitting, and Thursday we're not hitting. Ours are probably some of the lightest practice you've ever been to. But to get through our conference and even our non-conference schedule is always super competitive. You can't just beat your guys into the ground. You can't go 1980s football and, for us, we're not
the
2 or 3 guys deep.
Probably wouldn't work now.
No, I don't think the kids can handle it. I tell them that. I'm you don't get it. Will was at Augustana for 21 days before they started. And that's similar to what I was at ISU, but we were triples. And we hit. It wasn't like we had triples and we had to walk through like the NCAA has now. We hit 3 times a day.
Wow.
We hit on Thursdays in pro pads. And granted, we didn't play till Saturday, so you had that. Friday was a joke day too, where we were just helmets only. But we changed how football is done so much. I think that if you look at how safe things are, the way we do things, the time we spend on technique, and we're just not physically beating them up. We don't tackle to the ground in practice. We haven't done, and even before all this came down, we were already way ahead of that curve of we just didn't feel like you couldn't do that.
If you
can't make it through our season with our guys and do that kind of football.
If you could change one rule or create one rule in the IHSA, what would it be?
Oh my God, I would throw out the helmet practices. That's how my son lost his shoulder. Like that, to me, that one makes no sense of we're going to have kids all summer long, we're going to put them in a helmet and think that's going to condition them and get them ready. Like, you could do so much more in the acclimation if you were helmet and shoulder pads and you said you got them for an hour on the field. And like, you should trust that that person's going to be a professional, or you probably shouldn't have that person as your football coach. Like, you should probably get rid of that person if they don't understand that. But you put more kids at risk when you put them out there without the stuff that they play in. I mean, that's a simple one there. And the fact that they have a rule in the summer that if you don't stay in helmet and shoulder pads, you have to start that whole cycle back up again. So you penalize the kids instead of being able to get them out of their pads. Like, we don't want to be in pads all summer long. We want to hit some bursts where we get a chance to see them, and we don't want them to be burned out. Like, we're going to hit enough when we get into the Friday nights. It's physical game. Like, if you were at our game last week, there were some physical hits, both ways. Yeah. And your body can only take so much, and we're not too deep with super studs. Like, at college, you might have that second guy that's going to come in and he's pretty good. We don't have that guy in high school.
Well, you don't have 90 on the sideline.
No.
There's no
way. No, not at all. But I just think that rule kills me. And the other rule that they did away with of, you worry about concussions. Well, you can't cut a person now. So you have a 235-pound linebacker come against Cole Klein in the backfield that's a running back, and he's got to block him. My guy weighs 180 pounds with all this stuff on. You think that's a good matchup? Like, and I have no way to slow him down. If I cut you, you'll probably slow down the next time you come.
Right.
And that.
Now you have
when you're talking about head injuries and worrying about those, like, that would limit contact. And I get you don't want them cutting all over the field, but in the box area, that would lessen some things, I think.
Okay, two quick things and to wrap it up. Somebody wore a wristwatch in an NFL game last Sunday. Really expensive one. You saw that as a head coach on your sideline, what would you do?
I don't know. We'd probably be out on that. We usually don't have that problem. Like, I don't know what we would do with that. We did have a kid last year that would have a watchman in practice. Like, it was a younger sophomore. And I can remember Coach Malinowski would be like, "Hey, what time is it?" And he would pull his watch and be like, "Go take your watch off." We don't wear watches at practice. He's like, "Are you like checking to see if we're staying on time?" I don't even know who was that, because like the NFL I've soured on over the last few years. I used to be the world's biggest Steeler fan, and after the whole thing up in Chicago when they wouldn't come out with an Army Ranger, like, I was done. And I've always thought college ball was better than pro. There's too many guys that it's just a job.
Other than ISU, on College Saturday, who are you rooting for?
I got a couple of buddies that are Miami, Ohio. We've been over in some of the things that we do. We've gone over there. So Spence Nowinski and George both do a great job over there with those guys. And that staff's a great staff. Like watching them. And I like watching some of the Big Ten schools. Always like watching Alabama, Clemson, some of those teams of just like the athletes that they have are like ungodly when you look at what those guys can do.
Last thing. You win a special lottery. You get to be on the NFL sideline as a head coach. What NFL coach would you like to coach a game against? Just for a challenge and the experience? I thought you were going to
give me on my side. I'd rather have to pick the guy. I'm going to pick somebody.
Well, I'll ask you that too. Who would you like to work under? But who would you like to coach against at that level?
I think you can go back to some of the guys. There were some unbelievable old-time coaches when it was a different sport too, like from Lombardi, of how detailed he was in everything he did. But like Belichick, I know there's people that are Belichick haters, but I'm like, that guy's, I read a book about him of how he started. His father was a huge scout for, I think, Army, I believe. Like, got into that and like never saw them play until the last game of the year because he was always scouting ahead. And I think that's where Belichick got a lot of the skills he had and understood. I think that guy would be unbelievable to work with. I wouldn't want to coach against him. Like, I think that guy would shred you apart and know what you had. I think he's a guy that could take his team and beat yours, and then take your team and beat his. I think he's pretty sharp. As much as people are talking about they cheat and do this and they do that, I'm like, all I know is that guy's won a hell of a lot of games.
A few rings, too, here and there.
So coach against, I'm trying to think of somebody I know where I could get a chance and pick up a W where I got a chance.
You define it. Well, that guy's out of the league. Hugh Jackson's not in the NFL.
God, I don't know. A huge Steeler fan, so when you start going down through there, it's like you think about that program and only having 3 coaches forever.
Chuck Noll was
Chuck Noll, like
brilliant.
Like they didn't always have the best guys.
As a lifelong Cleveland Browns fan, I suffered that pain.
And Paul Brown's another one. You look at everything that he was able to accomplish, and like most coaches are like, who are those guys they're talking about that are younger? So I don't know. I would think Chuck Noll would be one just because of that. I think from a defensive standpoint, Fritz Schirmer, like as a D coordinator, I thought he was great. I had Mike Pryor that I played with in college, played for him and loved him. Like unbelievable guy, very smart. So I think if you were going to say from an offensive standpoint, who would you go against? I think that if you want to go against somebody I thought was pretty sharp and got a lot out of his guys, I would say Fritz Schirmer.
Last book you've read, or the book you're reading right now, you and your father and your grandfather, you said you're readers.
Last book I read was the one on Belichick. I'm trying to think what that was, Education of a Coach, I think is the name of that one. But it was unreal, just of like from a history standpoint, and not just talking about him and their friends and, how he basically was like a GA getting no pay at the NFL, like he wanted to be at that level. His dad had options to do that. The book was written really well. It talks about his dad and how his dad worked his way up through the ranks and finally found a place where he just stayed at Army because he loved it at Army and loved his job. Never wanted to be a head coach, never wanted to be a coordinator, just like that whole deal of breaking things down for the guys. And that's the last one I read at the end of summer.
What made you want to be a coach? Are you going to do this forever? I mean, what is it about coaching?
Probably towards the end of my tenure. Sometimes I think it would be great to just go back. Probably one of the best years I had as a coach was my first year at Eureka College with John Tolley, because I coached D-line. We played predominantly a 4-man front. I had 8 guys to play 4 to 5 spots, and they were all solid. Joe Duzek was a 2-time All-American. I had Shipman kid, Eric Shipman from Pekin. He was solid defensive tackle. Doug White was a nose guard for us that was super solid. Just it was tough to get him notoriety because you had Duzek playing. And then a kid from El Paso, Jason Allen, the past D coordinator told us, we had nothing but problems with him. The kid busted his ass for me every day, and those 4 guys were a wrecking crew out on the field. It was fun, and you only had that. You didn't have to worry about scouting reports. You didn't have to worry about anything. So I think when I get to where I'm done being a head coach, I'd probably go do something like that maybe, or just go watch games. I'm not sure.
What is it about coaching that is a trigger for you that you just love to do?
I like the practice part like more, and like the closeness with the guys. Like I hate games. Like these games
really?
are
the game is a little stomach ache?
Yeah, and like it's tough to make a lot of changes during the course of a game. Like you can tweak some things, but all week long you're trying to program those guys and get them ready to trigger and read their keys and go. And I like that a lot better. I love practice. Games, stressful day. Last week we're playing Belleville, who we know is going to be faster than we are and more athletic. And start walking. The officials are like, "Hey, captains," and I start walking. And all of a sudden I felt like somebody smacking me on the arm, and it's Jesse. He's like, "Coach, where are you going?" I'm like, "Going to the sideline." And I was walking to the wrong side because for 14 years, I walked to our visitor side now. I got about 5 steps in before he slapped me, and I was like, so that was kind of at least an icebreaker. Like, you live and die on Friday nights, and you have everybody that knows everything. You have people in the stands. You have people on Twitter that have never coached, never even played at the same level. Like, that's why I tell our kids, I'm like, hey, I don't know any of those guys that lined up and beat me in college, so I'm not going to listen to those guys. Until you put your hand in the dirt and you've done it, then you can come talk to me about what you know. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I don't like, is dealing with people that don't know. And I don't care what you do. There's always going to be, if you were working in the business world and you're running a construction site, there's going to be somebody that thinks they know a better way to do it. I'm like, that one probably gets to me the most. But I'd probably I don't know, probably 5 years tops. It still, I think, somewhere in that range. It depends on Will too. Like if Will's playing more, it's going to be harder to coach and try to go watch him play. It kind of depends on what he chooses, and he's well-rounded. He's a lot more well-rounded than I was. He's a great actor. He's great with speech. He got a lot of his money he got for Augustana was in the acting world. So if he's doing well in that, that's going to be a thing that's going to kind of tear too of wanting to go see him. I wish I'd be able to say I want to see Noah when he rolls through there. Rob's boys are live and die Panther football. They're just about the same age Will was when I started there. So that was tough too. The first game, like not just with Will, not as a player. That opening game, that's the first time Will's not on the sideline since probably 4th grade, 3rd grade.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Caleb Fisher, that kid's been around forever. JJ Gaudet, around forever. Like to not walk out with those guys running around, playing around.
Constant, every 4 years, you're losing people you care about. Right?
Yeah,
every
definitely.
year, really. But.
Every year you're losing that group that, you've put in a ton of time. Our kids, we go at 6 in the morning. That's a pretty big commitment. When you're getting up at 6 in the morning, you're not waking up at 6. You're getting up at 5:30, getting there, and that's part of the reason we won last Friday night, though, too. Like those guys were one-way guys, and they were gassed. Our guys were up, working hard all summer long, and that's a big commitment for our kids. It's a big commitment as a coach because, people don't get that either. That you're not paid during the, you're not paid in the playoffs. You're not paid in the summer. Like you're paid just your stipend, and if you go 9 weeks and you're done, you get paid the same as if you go 14 weeks. And then the summer on top of it. And it's not like you show up for an hour in the summer. We're there from 6 to 8. And then we've got 7-on-7 things that are going on, and we still got some community service things that we do during that time. So it's a lot of time. That's the tough thing. I have time away from family, time away from all those kind of things.
Well, thank you both, Coach Garcia and Coach Crouch, for helping us launch Coach's Corner here on the Journal Star. Your time's valuable, and you gave us some great insights today.
Thanks. And we're fortunate. They have a great staff, and Rob would echo the same thing.
You can see these podcasts. It's live right now, but you'll be able to see it on pjstar.com/podcasts. That's where they archive. And, check it out. If you missed part of this, you're going to probably want to check this out. And when we wrap up here, we're going to launch something else, too, called Chalk Talk, where we're going to break down a play once a week with an area coach and let him tell us what it is we're looking at and why what happened. So for our guests and for the Journal Star and for our engineer, Matt Dayhoff, I'm Dave Eminian. We're out.
Thank you.
Thank you.